Hello, and welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Network podcast, where everyone belongs, especially if you think you don't. Welcome, imposters. My name is Chris Grundeman, and I'm here with my always-on-time co-host, Zoe Rose.
Heyo.
This is the Massimiliano Max Mortillaro episode, and I think you're going to love it. Max is an industry analyst, a public speaker, and a technology practitioner. He currently offers consulting and influencer marketing services at Tech Unplugged, and he's also a colleague of mine at GigaOM, as well as an evangelist for fine Italian espresso. Hey, Max, would you like to introduce yourself a bit further to the Imposter Syndrome Network?
Hey, absolutely. Hello, Zoe and Chris, and thank you for having me. I think that the one you got the best is really definitely the espresso evangelism thing. So I'm Max Mortillaro, as you said. I was born in Italy. I grew up in France, so I'm a French citizen actually. And I live in Prague, Czech Republic for now 20 plus years. So that's it in a nutshell. Married, kids, cats, and quite a crazy busy life.
Nice. That's awesome. That's quite the range of countries to have lived in and be from and stuff. So maybe we'll dig into that a little bit more. That's interesting to me. But today I want to actually start way back at the beginning of your technology journey. Can you tell us a little bit about how and maybe also why you got into tech in the first place? You know, was it from childhood or in school, or was it later? Are there any specific people who ignited or inspired your love of technology along the way? Or, I mean, whatever, right? Just how did this start? Why are you in tech today?
Yeah, I think that like many people, when I was a child, we started, having these computers at school. We had these crazy projects in the 80s where each European country wanted to build their own computer system. So in our case in France, we had Thomson computers where you would learn to do BASIC or Logo rather, the thing where you would move a pointer and draw things. There was a server in the room and it looked like some crazy stuff. I really love that. We were playing, of course, computers at the neighbors. We had consoles. I think that for me, it really started when, of course, consoles were the first kind of introduction to computer-like technology. But at my dad's work, they had an Amstrad, a PC 1512, I think. And I was using there. Sometimes one of the colleagues would let me play there, and I would paint stuff on Microsoft Paint and things of that kind. At some point, we even got a computer at home. My dad brought a 286. And I think the first thing that we did together with my dad was we're trying to set it up. We went into the BIOS before we did a low-level formatting of the hard drive. And we saw that computer 2 or 3 weeks later when it was reinstalled again. So that was my first introduction to technology. And as you know, when you do this job, I think you learn by mistakes, right? And I think that I've been learning a lot based on the mistakes I did. So that's been the first kind of introduction to that. And of course, I think that the aha moment was at some point we wanted to buy an audio card, a Sound Blaster Pro 8, I think it was, back in the day. And the moment was when I suddenly understood how it works, that you need to set up some jumpers and install the drivers. At this point, I was kind of hooked into it, and I was like, my God, that's what I want to do all my life. So that's kind of how it started.
It's the figuring out the puzzle pieces and putting them together. I really enjoyed that as well. I'd be interested in understanding your journey because I think I've lived in a few countries and I know how difficult that can be to transition to a new country. But I've not gone through the challenge that you've gone through where you have 3 native languages according to your social media. And then you're also, on top of that, Italian and you're learning Chinese. So I'm curious in the kind of the cultural influences there and the challenges we're facing moving to different countries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be fun because I love talking about languages. And basically, I have a passion for everything which is totally unrelated to IT and languages and the history of languages and cultures and civilization and history and writings and all. I love all of that stuff. The thing is, I grew up bilingual or actually trilingual, if I could say it that way, because my family has Italian origins, actually both my father and my mother. Yeah? So even if I'm a French citizen, there are Italians back on both sides. And at home, we were talking primarily Italian, Sicilian, and French as well, because I moved very young to France, but I think I was around 3 years old. So that's how my mom learned to speak French, by the way, as well, with me and then with my sisters. And I grew up in France until 21, I think I was 23 when I moved to the Czech Republic. So French, Italian, Sicilian, which is a language, but it's complicated. I learned that. I learned English at school as well. And I was always more on the language side than on the mathematics and the science side, which is fun if you look at what I'm doing as a job right now. But the languages were easy. And when I moved to Czech Republic in 2002, it took me around a year and a half, 2 years to learn the language. I think I speak it fluently these days. So it's more a matter of affinity. And of course, there's more to that. I mean, Spanish, I understand. I could read Portuguese. I understand a bit Polish. I understand a bit of Russian, Ukrainian, blah, blah. I mean, you name it. And Chinese is, something I said like, let's try it because there's a lot of things going on there in tech and so on. I think it's going to be one of the interesting countries in the next 20, 30 years to follow, So I wanted to be up to date as well on what's going on there. So that's it on the languages. But you have to stop me because I talk too much.
That makes me laugh because when I started in tech, I had this guy tell me if I wanted to do security, I had to know 5 languages or I had to understand multiple languages. And one of them was Chinese. He's like, you have to know Chinese because of the hackers. And I was like, I really don't think I need to know Chinese. And then I've never actually needed to, but it would have been nice if I'd learned it. And your use case is literally, I'm interested to learn Chinese because of what's going on. Not the hackers, but what's going on over there. So that's really funny to me. But I am jealous because my daughter is also growing up trilingual and I am not. I barely speak English. So
languages are definitely not something that have been a strong suit for me. I mean, growing up in America, I think I have a slight disadvantage because it's not really a normal thing to begin with. But I've tried to pick up languages, and I know a little bit of a couple here and there. Spanish, I can kind of get around. Like I wouldn't be totally lost in Spain or Mexico or further south here in the Americas, but definitely not having like conversations at the level I'd like to. I feel like a child for sure, which is embarrassing. So, I think it's super interesting, right? The move through the country. So what was it that brought you to the Czech Republic? Was that work or was it family or why make that move from France to the Czech Republic?
You're not going to believe me, but one of the things I was doing, when I was in university and even after, I used to play a role-playing game. Have you heard about MUDs or multi-user dungeons?
Oh, yeah.
So it used to be like role-playing games that you will play over telnets. You will log into a console, log in there, and you will be playing. It's all text-based. And it was the Two Towers MUD, which I think still runs, actually. And I still have my character from 20 plus years ago, probably. Still exists. I log in from time to time to check people. And I used to play a bad guy, and there was this character going on, an elf, which I said hello to, and which I wrote me a mail to tell me that she was so happy that I didn't kill her. And so we started chatting, and it turns out that it was a girl living in the Czech Republic. So I said, I'll come over and I visit. And it kind of started being a relationship, and I moved over there. And of course, things change, you discover people and so on. So it didn't work out in the end, but in the meantime, I had secured a job as a sysadmin, and that's why I kind of stayed in the Czech Republic. And 20 years after, I'm still around.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. I like that a lot. And then it kind of, while you're moving around or doing these things, I'm interested in kind of diving into your career a little bit as well. And I know obviously now you're doing a lot of research analysis, of consulting and influencer marketing and those types of things. But that obviously wasn't your beginnings. I believe you started out as more on the system administrator side and working on compute and storage. So maybe you can walk us through, give us a snapshot of your career and what led up to where you are now.
Absolutely. I'm going to go even a bit backwards, looking even at, university, because I think there it's where I started, looking into things a bit more seriously. Of course, I was already kind of helping people with computers, fixing computers, doing things that I kind of developed a passion into doing things and hacking around with the machines. And actually, I spent 2 years studying law at the university in southeast of France. But I was spending most of my time playing games and doing LAN parties and going to the science university, which was just behind where I had my dorm. And there we had high-speed access. We had T1 access. And so you could go there. They had Linux-based machines, and you could do whatever you wanted, the type of Alta Vista and stuff like that. And things went well. I found after 3 years of failure, I went to a new class, which was computer-based. where I could, and second year folks would be able to get console Linux access. They would get, it wasn't Linux, it was a Unix account actually. And I kind of managed to talk the colleagues into getting me a Unix account. The thing is that in my attempt to do experiments there, I started to read more and more stuff. And I thought, maybe this version of System 5 has a bug there. And if you do this and you do that, you could crash the core and you could dump the passwords and things like that. So I found myself in a kind of and I was spending a lot of time on weird IRC channels. So I think there was a time where I kind of felt that it would be better if I leave the university forever and, start looking for a job until to avoid some trouble. Let's put it that way. It's not that I did anything really serious, but the thing is that the folks of the university had a wall and they had all of the name, all the logins, and all of the passwords printed there so that you would know how to log in there and you were supposed to change your password. But the thing is that a lot of people didn't change their password. And, I was like, okay, let's try it. Maybe it's going to work. So I had to find a job and I secured a job as a so-called IT trainer. So I was working for a smaller organization and setting up a little network with Windows machines and teaching people to learn how to use Windows and Office, and I had to develop some courses and stuff like that. It was interesting, but it was very quickly boring. And I was looking more into doing stuff with networks. I was at the time exploring Active Directory and things of that kind. It was, the time of when Windows 2000 was coming up. So I started getting disinterest on one side. On the other hand, my dad used to work at the Congress Center in Monte Carlo. And there was this very huge thing in the 90s, which was called Imagina. It was a kind of an expo show, something like VMworld. Imagine VMworld, but for 3D, for virtual reality and things of that kind. I've seen crazy stuff at the time. And I would get there, my dad would work at night, and I would be there with him on weekends with the technicians. And so I could see crazy things that you would never see, like people working with Silicon Graphics, IRX workstations, huge things. At the time, you'd have like 4 megs of RAM or 8 megs of RAM on your computer. And these guys were working with like 8 gigs, 16 gigs. They had graphic cards, crazy stuff, desks, with trays of processors. And I was like, I want to do that. I was so crazy into it. And so just jumping around, I wanted to move towards a kind of a more interesting role. I was looking at moving to Czech Republic at the time. So I found this system administrator role somewhere at the French embassy. And that's where the next step of the career stepped up somehow. And it was really cool because it was really a qualitative jump because it was much more interesting. I'd have to manage the network. At the time, they had just computers running Windows individually. So it was also a first for me. I started building the network somehow, build an Active Directory domain controller, build the first servers there, thought about print servers, network shares, starting to look a bit at security. Of course, if I look at that right now, it felt very primitive, right? But they had nothing. So it all started from there. I think that was my first experience also with networking, getting a firewall in, trying to create a backup server as well, So it was a big deal for me at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I like the point that you make about there was this wall of passwords and accounts. Because I was looking at your social media and you're like, when I say that, I mean like LinkedIn and your blog and all that. And your areas of interest, along with Italian Espresso, of course, are around privacy and security, encryption and digital rights. So I'm curious, was your kind of roots of figuring out, oh my goodness, there's so many issues here and oh my goodness, so many risks. Did that kind of inspire you to want to look more closely at security and privacy? Or is that something that you just kind of grew into naturally as well?
It's a very interesting question, actually. It's something I think that grew kind of naturally as everything grew. I mean, if you look at the past 20 years, we've been kind of growing alongside the internet, the various services and so on. You wouldn't really necessarily worry about security and privacy in the mid-90s, where you would have your computer at home, which would probably not even have a modem, at least even at the time, right? You wouldn't really care about it because there wasn't really nothing to be really worried about. Not that someone wouldn't steal your credit card number, but you didn't have that amount of data, the services were not there and so on. Now you're at a point where it has become a kind of an industrialized collection of data, which is shared among many people. You never know who you're going to, where your data is going to fall into and so on. So I thought, it's not in so much that you need to protect everything. It's you need to be aware that it's your data, that it's your personal data. You need to protect it, and you need to be conscious about what you're doing with it, right? It's not that, hey, here it is. I have all the information about Max, commit, pick up for free, do whatever you want with that. No, it's Max's information, or it's Zoe's, or it's Chris' information. And I'm in control here, right? It's my home. I decide who gets access to what. It's more about it in the end. And being aware.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I like that a lot. And, the Internet Society talks about your digital footprint, right? And just because I think that's something too that, some people think, oh, well, I've got, my data, my files are like stored on a drive on my computer and I'm fine. But it's not just that, right? It's actually, you leave these kind of breadcrumbs behind as you move around online and if you do anything online.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You leave the breadcrumbs online, and this digital footprint is a new thing because the former generations didn't have that, right? I'm doing some genealogy research for the fun, and it's hard to find information about people because you had nothing, right? But now, if you look about it, you could have said something 10 or 15 years ago, which is totally irrelevant, stupid. You could look at it and say, what the hell did I say that? And it's there because if it was on a website and it was archived, then you can go and you can find it. You could find probably all of these sort of my tweets or your tweets or whoever's. If you were on a forum, then you're going to find the information. So if you're looking for someone and you want to do some damage, there's probably a treasure trove of information you could find archived about that person. So that's one of the aspects of it. The other aspect is about not what you, let's say, leave behind you unconsciously, but what you have created and amassed over the years, right? So it's your digital legacy. It's an interesting thing which I was exploring as well. You create all of this data. You have to think about what happens after I'm gone. All the photos that you have, all of the files, and it's a lot of information. You could have bank stuff, financial stuff, things that you may want to leave accessible to whoever is going to survive you, the kids, the wife, your partner, whoever it is. And you have to think also about a strategy for that. Okay, what do I do? How do I give the access? I was looking into that and it's just so overwhelming. Where do I get started? Do I start by leaving a code to my safe where I leave a list of instructions? Do I leave that to my lawyer, whatever, And from where you take it? Because you also need to think that not everybody is going to be as technically literate as you are. So they may have a hard time to get access to the information. Oh, it's crazy, this data-driven era.
Yeah. Well, and the idea of like what you don't want left behind. I mean, yes, there's stuff that I want to stay. I want my daughter to have access to her photos. I want, if I were to be the one to leave first, I'd want my husband to have access to the money. But there's also the comment of, there's some things that I probably want to keep private. I can't think of them at the moment, but I'm sure there's something.
The meme about deleting browser history. Delete my browser history.
Yeah,
that's your last word.
I mean, mostly you're just going to find me trying to figure out how to spell certain words and how to, what the actual definition of most words are. But maybe I don't want you to see how bad I am at that.
and there was a research recently which was kind of really interesting. I don't know, Chris, if you've seen that, but I think that our friend John Collins from Gigam was sharing that. It's a kind of a psychologist research on your digital persona and whether you're curating the information. It was really interesting as well because, we are who we are, and the friends who know us and the partners who know us as a person with a lot of good sides and bad sides. We have our, downsides, or we can be kind of angry, whatever, bored, I don't know. And when you're online, you kind of decide what you want to show. So you can be totally true to yourself and you just don't care and be as you are with all the advantages and convenience, or you want to give out a more professional curated image. And then, who you're presenting is not exactly who you really are in the end, because it's like when you're at work, you put on a mask. Yeah. Either you are, Michael Scott and YOLO, and you're done, like office style, or you're going to pay a bit more attention about yourself. So I think it goes to what you said before, Zoe, as well. What do I want to show? What do I want to leave behind? Kind of ties into this.
Well, and also, I can't remember where the research was, but there was also research done about innovation and how people's right to be private, their right to privacy, they feel safer to be more innovative. So if they feel like somebody's watching them constantly, they're scared to make mistakes and they're scared to try new things. So actually, privacy is beneficial to society in general because it allows people to be more innovative and fail more, I suppose, but in a good way.
I'm kind of laughing because you say, that when you're not watched, you can do things. I was thinking if innovative for you includes doing big mistakes at work or things of that kind.
Yes, I am curious about that, actually. Do you have a story about a massive mistake?
Oh my God, I've had my share of those. There's been so many of these things. I think one of the earliest things I can remember about was, so I was doing at my first job tape backups. And at some point I came across information that, sometimes tapes, when you use tapes, the quality of the tape degrades, right? So at some point you cannot read them at all. And of course I was absolutely fully confident that this tape that I'm using for backups is fine. And I think I had a set of 7 tapes and I was rotating them almost every day or something like that. And at some point I did a test for recover and of course it was not readable. So there was no damage involved, thankfully. And it was a beginner's lesson. I think I was 24 or 25 at the time. So, what would I know? And I very quickly ordered new tapes and then I was being a bit more diligent about that. There's been one of those events. There's been mistakes made by others that I had to sort out as well. These were funniest, of course, because it wasn't involving me. I think one of the moments where I learned about the dark magic of networking was when I'd moved already to another job. I was working at a big bank at the Prague branch. And we were setting up a new VMware environment. And we had set up everything, was working fine. But the configuration made by the integrator was kind of basic. And we wanted to bring more stability into the thing. So we had studied carefully. I think in VMware, the so-called heartbeat network is one of the most critical parts because if you lose the heartbeat, then everything could go down or restart or whatever. You could cause an isolation between the clusters, whatever. And so we had planned everything ahead. We had checked and so on. We just did one little mistake. I was so confident in the plan that everything would go well that I said, okay, we can do that during business day, So I did everything. Everything seemed to go properly. And at some point, we started getting calls that everything went down, all of the servers, everything, nothing was working. Shares were not working, everything. It was one of the moments when you get an adrenaline rush and you're trying to figure out what's going on. It felt like it was going very fast. We figured out everything was brought up very promptly. We had no issues whatsoever afterwards. It was just a brief 5-10 minute interruption. But we figured out afterwards that while everything was okay on the virtualization layer, we didn't account the fact that when you're changing switch ports on Cisco switches, there's a setting called fast port, which is about the port coming up very quickly. Normally, the port takes, I think, 60 seconds to initialize or 30 seconds or something like that. I think it's 60 seconds. And VMware has an isolation response after 30 seconds. So basically, we were 30 seconds short because the port wouldn't activate in time. And the vendor, which installed the thing, didn't set the isolation response to keep running things. It set it up to shut down everything. Right? So there were mistakes made, but there were a lot of lessons learned that day in terms of configuration.
I wonder how many mistakes were due to timing on networking. Because anytime I talk to a networking person, and my own experience as well, is it always has something to do with the number of seconds.
But the fun thing, I'm absolutely not a networking guy, but the fun thing about networking, it's not fun because there are people running it, right? But it seems to be so complex, and yet, it seems to be, I would say, very, very stable in many cases. Of course, you run into problems, but I have not been for a long time in an environment where there will be major networking issues. But I don't know, you guys are the experts on networking, so you tell me.
Oh, I'm not an expert. You're mistaken here.
See, security is the opposite of networking because if security had their way, all the networks would stop passing packets, right?
Things would just be dead.
You'd be sending pigeons.
Yeah, well, actually, not really, but no, yeah, on the topic of failure, I saw on your social media you wrote "failed sportsmen." What is that about?
Oh, I think it's pretty much, I would say, how to say that? I think I really appreciate people who sport and people who are good at that. For whatever reason, I'm not good at sporting, and I'm a bit too overweight to, let's say, put in the effort. Let's say I'm kind of walking and trying to do stuff. I'm actually trying to get back again into that because I think that my 30s were more a moment of family growing, a bit of neglection, work, etc. And by the time you start getting into your 40s, like a friend said, you're in the middle of a river and or a bridge or whatever, and it's burning behind you, so you cannot go back, and you don't know what's ahead of you, right? So you think that you want to do what's best with what's ahead of you. So that's the thing. And yeah, I mean, definitely, I think that it's easier for me to let's say start cooking a great meal rather than say, okay, I'm gonna hit the gym this morning. And usually, the thing about hitting the gym is not about me getting the car and going there. It's all about kind of starting to plan logistics and where am I going to go and when and where do I need to park and this and that, and I need to talk to people and it's complicated and blah, blah. Rather than just, if I want to go out, I just get the shoes and go out and walk in the nature, and I'm just happy with that. So it's a bit easier for me somehow.
Yeah, I think more people should bring back the daily constitutional, I think people used to call it, and just going for a walk in the morning. It's pretty beneficial. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Max, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with the Imposter Syndrome Network. And obviously, thank you to all of our listeners, all of you imposters out there, for your attention and your support. We have a LinkedIn group, if you don't know of it, for the Imposter Syndrome Network that we'd love for you to join to get and give career advice, mentorship, or just general community support. And don't forget to tell everyone about this podcast. Well, only tell them if you liked it. Before we close out, Max, I am still curious. And since we started the show at the beginning, I'd like to end there as well. If you could go back through some sort of trans-dimensional portal and give your younger self some advice right before starting your career, what would that advice be? What would you tell your younger self if you could? So
I'd say one thing, I'll try to be very brief, but when I was working for that financial company, HSBC, I think it was around, since when my first kid was born, around 32 something. I found on their HR portal, they had the thing about growing the career and all. And I found a really interesting thing. It was a kind of a projection thing, which is the typical stuff, right? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? But they had this thing really detailed about, write down what you would like to do as a job, which will satisfy you. What would you want to have? What have you accomplished? And so on. And seeing that thing at the time, I was certifying wanted to certify for the expert for whatever it's called, for the VCP, actually. It was the training for VMware. At the time I was into that. And I looked into this and I told myself, yeah, I don't want to be here. I want to do something better. And I wrote that thing, and believe it or not, what I wrote down, I managed to even go a bit better. So what I would advise everybody in IT, regardless of your age, is give yourself a vision of what you want to do. Even if you don't get there, even if you take a different route, it's good to have a plan. Even some generals say that. I mean, it's about having priorities, knowing what you want to do. So think about what you want to achieve in your personal life, what you want to achieve professionally, what you want to learn. Also, not just what you want to do, but what you don't want to do, right? Think well about things. Is it good for you? Are you in a good place? Is it toxic? I think it's also inspiring maybe to look at people around you, look at people which are positive, people which are negative. I think a thing that really made a big difference for me was looking at unhappy people at the workplace. And always, I didn't build myself in, I want to be like this guy, but always was like, oh my God, I don't want to end like that. I don't want to end in a dead garage, rail or whatever. I wanted to do something different. And it's what probably has pushed me over and over. So think about that. And also important advice as well. When you're young, think about having a financial plan as well. Put a bit of money aside, even if it's a little, because as it goes on, it's going to grow and you will never regret having put that money aside probably. So that's the advice. Think about what you want to do, where you want to be, what fulfills you. It doesn't need to be 80 at all, but think about what will make you happy, because in the end, you don't want to look back and regret, what you did do or did not do.
I like that advice a lot, Max. I think, the idea of that visualization tool you found early on, I mean, that's really important, I think, is because it's, I have found that really powerful, is that thinking through what it looks like, right? Not just kind of what you want or where you want to go, but what does that look like, right? When you wake up, what do you do? What happens next? Like, what are you actually working on? Those visualization techniques really help. But I mean, to your other point, I think, what you said, and I'm just kind of repeating here, is, not to be paralyzed by that either. Because I think I've talked to a lot of young folks who they get scared and they're like, oh, well, I don't know what I want to do. And like, if I choose wrong, it's going to be, this bad choice. And, my advice is always, well, no motion, is worse than kind of slow motion, and you can change your mind, but having somewhere to aim towards kind of helps you set off, right? If you have nowhere to go, you don't really go anywhere. And if you head off in one direction and you decide you want to change it, that's fine. Having a plan probably didn't hurt you. Actually, it at least got you, off the couch, off your butt, out to do into the world to do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And just to close on that, there's a lot of it which sounds very cliche, right? But it's really like that. You think about where you want to be, and as you said, think about the steps which bring you there. Okay, for example, when I was a sysadmin, I wanted to be a senior sysadmin, and there was no way for me to jump into there. That's what led me to jump to my other job as a pre-sales consultant. At the end, the job sucked in a way, but it was interesting and it brought a lot of experiences as well, really interesting stuff, which I used later. My plan was when I was a senior, when I was in sysadmin, and I was almost senior kind of like in my team. And I was like, okay, I would want to be an IT manager at the time. And I was thinking about what it implies, what skills do I need to understand, what I need to master, because it's not just that you're the best IT guy in the team, and I wasn't, and you want to jump there and you don't. It requires an entirely different set of skills. You need to manage people. You need to have a bit of understanding diplomacy, whatever. So the skill set is totally different. And that's maybe the other thing as well for people who are listening to us, is that you need to think about your soft skills a lot, because being good technically is a great thing, but it's not enough. You will interact with people. You need to think about how to handle that. You will deal with angry people. You will deal with people who have doubts and so on. In my case, the older I grow, the more frank and honest and open. Not that I was dishonest, but the more open I am to tell my opinion, even if it's unpleasant, even if it's, whatever. But in the end, you come to a point where you say, I'm not being paid to be nice. I'm being paid to express an opinion, to say things the way they are. If there is a major difficulty, if there's a major hurdle, I don't mind to express it. Yeah, and then you take it and you make an opinion out of that. Does it make sense? There's always some risk in the business when you make a decision. Should we have gone for this? Should we have gone for that? So you cannot please everybody, but being able to communicate, to express your opinion properly, to articulate it, to give a rationale. And I think it's not just about spoken communication, it's also about written communication. When I started working as a sysadmin, I used to write very long emails about, we should do this and that, and here's the thing. And now I'm really trying to be as succinct as possible and get to the point. I think that's important when you communicate, to get to the point. You can explain briefly what's going on. You can give an opinion on steps that need to be done. And I think the most important thing that a lot of people forget, what is the action item? What is the takeaway? Who needs to do what? There is this thing which doesn't work. Here's how we should fix it. What's the pros and the cons of each of the solution? And what is the next step, right? Who takes the decision? Okay, is it your manager who takes the decision? Involve the right people. Communication is one of the most, let's say, overlooked things in corporate communication and in corporate relationships and so on. So that's just another takeaway, perhaps.
Yeah, a ton of great insight, Max. Thank you. That's great advice. Hopefully everyone takes a lot of that to heart. I agree with everything you said. Are there any current projects you're working on? Obviously, we'll have kind of your blog and your website, and all of your social profiles will be in the show notes. But is there anything else you want to highlight for the Imposter Network before we close out?
No, I just say we're doing a lot of work, of course, with Gigaom. You know that. So we have quite a few project lines for the next couple quarters. Nothing special going on. I think on the personal side, for the fun of it, I'm going to go into a very complex house reconstruction project. So I may be out of the place where I live for the next 6 months. But it sounds complicated, scary, crazy, super exciting. My wife and I and the kids are excited about what's going to happen. The cats are not going to be excited at all. But The thing which is cool about that is that I will probably be able to build some cool sound system at home, and I'm so much looking forward to that. So like you said, you have your little LEDs going on your microphone, and looking to have the old school view meters like
Nice.
on the ampli. So I look forward to that.
Fantastic.
And more cooking.
Fantastic. Good luck with the project. And we will be back next week.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm just excited because my microphone lights up.
Yeah.
I turned the setting on so it lights up depending on how loud I am. It just makes me happy.
It's like a little, like a little sound meter built into the mic. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's very, with Kit, the talking car, and like the Baywatch dude drives it around.
Oh, yeah. I forgot the name. Knight Rider.
Knight Rider. It's a little Knight Rider-ish.
It looks so cool at the time, and now it's just like, oh my God. Yeah.